Hey guys, welcome back to Maelstrom Game Studios, and I finally have the Tyranid Codex, like probably a lot of you, and we're going to dive into it today. Now, I'm not going to go through everything there is in this codex, but what I'm going to do is give some initial impressions on how I think the codex is, more of a layout, not necessarily how it is competitive-wise and all that. That'll be saved for various videos later to come. But just my initial thoughts on the codex. I will go over all of the new detachments, so this will be mainly used as a detachment review, give some ideas. Later in the week, again, we'll cover lists and stuff that more specifically target each detachment. But for here, this will be mainly known as a detachment overview. So that sounds good. And if you're new here, do like and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our content here at Maelstrom Game Studios. We cover a ton of stuff Tyranid related. And now that we have our full codex, we can go into the depths of this thing, covering all of the units in here and all of the tactics, strategies, lists, whatever we can come up with this book. So thank you guys, thank you members for supporting us, and let's dive into today's video. Before we get into each individual detachment, I do want to just talk again, like I said, about the layout, the looks, everything I think of the codex. I do like the cover. I'm a little bummed they kept almost the same art as they did from the last codex. I wish it would have been, I would have liked some new art. However, I do really like the art from the 9th edition codex, so I'm torn there. The colors are just a little bit different. They pop a little bit more. They're not as saturated as they were before, and I like that. Now, some other things in the codex, it's got your typical stuff. Again, I just want to talk on this briefly because this will be my first video on the codex. It's got your typical lore. It's got a how to paint. It's got, the collections, the battle or the combat patrol. And then it gets into some good stuff. So you got combat patrol, like I said, and then it breaks it up from combat patrol to detachments, and all your detachments are all in their own set of 2 pages. So we have here the invasion fleet, you have your enhancements, your detachment rules, your enhancements, and your stratagems. And every one is just like that, 1 page, bam, everything you know for that detachment. And then they have the data sheets. Now, the one question I have with the data sheets is, I cannot figure out why they put them in the order they did. It makes no sense to me. If someone can point out the order of why they did how they did, explain to me, because I don't get it. They start out, it seems like, oh, they're going HQs, Hive Tyrants, the Winged Prime, the Neuro Tyrant, but then they go to the Emissary and Assimilator, which aren't characters, and then they go to the Neurolictor, which isn't a character, and then they go back to characters like the Broodlord and the Swarm Lord, and Old One-Eye, and the Parasite, and then go into their Gaunts, which makes sense, but then they just start kind of jumping around, and I do not understand the order of this at all. Part of me thought it was alphabetical, but it's not. It makes no sense, unfortunately. So if you have the data cards, and I haven't opened mine yet, I would recommend those for looking at your individual data sheets when you are using your army in the middle of a game, because I don't know how you're supposed to figure it out in this one. The Tervagon is towards the back end of it. The Zoanthropes are last, which is why I thought maybe it's alphabetical, but I don't know. If someone, again, understands how they put them in the order they did, let me know, but it just doesn't make sense to me right now. And then you have your Crusade stuff. I won't go into Crusade, but I like that they broke up Crusade at the end of the book, and they kept it separate, and they didn't do this whole weird mix match like they did in the old codex. And then finally, the points updates, and they did include a nice little QR code right here, as many of you can see, which talks about how the points are going to be updated. Find your most up-to-date points there. I like that. I understand points aren't going to change. You could argue saying, oh, it's annoying that, the points are already out of date in this codex. Is the price we pay for a balanced book. So, it is what it is. But overall, I do like the codex. And that was my short little, you know, a few minutes about it. Let's dive into the actual detachments now. So we have 5 new detachments and the original one. Invasion Fleet is the same. Don't have to go into too much depth. I will cover it just because if you are new to Tyranids watching this in the future, you still want to see the old detachment rules, so we'll touch on that. But Invasion Fleet, Crusher Stampede, Vanguard Onslaught, Unending Swarm, Assimilation Swarm, and the Synaptic Nexus. Each of them have 6 new strats and 4 new enhancements. So let's just go right. We'll touch on the Invasion Fleet. Again, this is identical to the Index. So if you don't have the Codex, but you still want to use these rules, you could buy the data cards and you could buy this or just download the Index, and the rules are exactly the same. It is the same deal. Well, I guess I should say there's one small change where you still have your 3 hyper adaptations. You get to pick one at the start of the battle. You got sustained hits 1 versus infantry and swarms, lethal hits versus vehicles and monsters, and critical hits are precision hits against obviously characters. Now the only change here is one of the enhancements. Synaptic Linchpin did get a hefty point increase. It was 10 points, now it is 20 points. It either grants a unit synapse, or if they have synapse, it goes up to, well, it gives a unit 9-inch synapse. So whether you put that on a character that already had synapse and goes 9 inches, or it's a character that didn't have synapse and now they have 9-inch synapse. It's a good thing. I liked including it on Neuro Tyrant because he kind of sat in the back and having 9-inch synapse on him was helpful, but now 20 points might not be worth it, but maybe. Adaptive Biology is still the same. 5-up Feel No Pain, but if you start a turn with taken wounds, then it goes to a 4-up Feel No Pain. Alien Cunning, still not great. It's 30 points to redeploy, but in this one you must do it before the roll-off, so you don't know who's going first. Still, you can find use for it, but it's not as ideal. And finally, Perfectly Adapted, 1 reroll of certain kinds. It tells you it's typically the same thing a command point reroll is good for. Overall, this is a solid one. I don't have a specific tier ranking, power ranking for how these are, but I would put this to the middle to top half of our detachments. It's also probably the easiest one to play with because it's such a well-rounded detachment. We do have 6 stratagems for this. We've got Predatory Imperative. You get to choose 1 hyper adaptation extra to be chosen. If it's for 1 unit, unless they're in synapse range, they can pick 2 units, and they have both hyper adaptations active for the turn. Endless Swarm, D3+3, Endless Multitude models are regened. If it's, again, synapse, 2 units in synapse range or 1 unit otherwise. The synapse is a common theme here. Rapid Regen, one of the best ones we have. Even with all the new ones, this is still one of the best. 1 CP for 6-up Feel No Pain. If they're in synapse range, 5-up Feel No Pain. Really good one there. Death Frenzy, Fight on Death on a 4+. It's a bit swingy if you use it on a big monster, but if you've got a bunch of Gene Stealers or Hormagaunts that this might happen, they're just going to get swung at first. It's not a bad option if you have the CP around. Adrenal Surge, 2 CP for 5+s in melee to hit are critical hits. 2 units you can choose if they're in synapse range. So very good one there. And then finally 1 CP for Overrun. You can do a 6-inch consolidate or a normal move if you're in synapse range. So instead of consolidating your normal 3 inches, you get 6 inches. Or if you're in synapse range, you can go a totally different direction, which is something you can't really, no one has access to in 40k these days. So that's Invasion Fleet. Kind of breeze through it quickly because, well, it's old stuff, but still, if you are new, welcome, and here's your first attachment. Now, we move on to Crusher Stampede, and this is a controversial one because when people hear Crusher Stampede, they think of the old Crusher Stampede that absolutely demolished everything if you played it right. Man, Crusher Stampede was so good before. This is drastically different. The only 2 things that are the same is 1, it centers around monsters, and 2, it has the same name. That's about it. Everything else is very different here. So your detachment rule is Enraged Behemoths. This is +1 to hit if you are below your starting strength, and +1 to wound if you are below half strength. Now, it's unfortunate that in order to take benefit of your detachment rule, you have to be dealt damage. You have to be wounded. You can't just start off like, you know, take Eldar for example. They get to have a hit and wound reroll all the time. They can be at full health. We get +1 to hit and +1 to wound if we are already damaged. So if you're perfectly healthy, you don't get anything from this. It's unfortunate. But still, if you do take a benefit of these, it is very good to have +1 to wound and +1 to hit. The enhancements, Ominous Presence is +3 to your OC. It's not bad. You could stick it on a Tervagon and have OC 8, which is pretty cool. Enraged Reserves, Fight on Death on a 3+. So you could put that on, I don't know, a Hive Tyrant if you want. I don't think it's worth it, but it's an option. Null Nodes, or Null Nodules, has to be one of the worst enhancements of all of 40k. Once you get 5-up Feel No Pain against a psychic attack. Once? Not for the whole game? Just once? It seems baffling why they said just once, but whatever. If you got 10 points and you know you're going up against Thousand Suns or Grey Knights, sure. And then this last one, 25 points for Monsters Nemesis, +1 to wound monsters and vehicles is very good. That one, it's hard to argue with as bad. You could stick it on a Hive Tyrant, and then you are now wounding on, for most vehicles, you're going to be wounding on 4s twin linked. Maybe you're going to be wounding on 3s twin linked. Unlikely, you'll ever wound on 2s. But it's a nice, healthy bump to damage output there against the bigger stuff. Overall, it's not great, but I do think with the right units in certain matchups, it does have significant potential. Going into stratagems, which is where I think this detachment really shines. Your first one is Corrosive Viscera, Auto Explode, a non-flying monster. Now this one has got some decent play because we have a couple things. We've got some monsters that have big D6 explosions, which 1 CP to do a big 6-inch ring of D6 mortal wounds is nasty. Again, you get a big monster in there, it can, for 1 CP, can do a lot of damage. You could also have something like a Psychophage. It has Deadly Demise 1. So if you get him around a bunch of monsters and he dies first, because your opponent maybe wants to get rid of that 6-up Feel No Pain bubble, he dies, pay 1 CP. Yes, every monster within a bubble takes a mortal wound, but if that's the case, they are all having that +1 to wound. Again, I don't think the Psychophage is great. Honestly, at 125 points, I still think it's a bit overcosted, but maybe there's room for one in one of these kinds of lists. Savage Roar, again, a very good strat. In the fight phase, you use it, the enemy is -1 to hit, and then they have to take a battle shock, and if they fail, they're -1 to wound. So that's very good because just 1 CP outright, -1 to hit, affects a lot of melee armies, and then if they do fail that battle shock test, -1 to wound. And Tyranids, we have a lot of ways to manipulate, well, we have many ways to manipulate this battle shock test. The new Neurolictor comes to mind, that -1 to leadership. No, they don't have that. Death Leaper, that might be what I'm thinking about. There are ways to cause this, so not too bad there. 1 CP for Massive Impact. Finally, we have access to this stratagem. In the charge phase, you roll 66. Every 4+ is a mortal wound. It's a good way to get a chunk of mortal wounds, just a little bit extra damage out on your opponent. Another 1 CP one, Swarm Guided Salvos. A monster ignores hit modifiers and cover. If your opponent is popping like Smokescreen or something, there you go. You could pop this one. Or if your opponent has got some sort of stealth something, yes, it's a good one for 1 CP. And finally, Untrampled Ferocity is a really unique strat, is that you can move through enemy models and or auto-pass Desperate Escape tests. So you could have your big, massive Norn Emissary now, and let's say it's being body blocked by a couple small units, and there is that key character on the other side of the wall, other side of the infantry. Walk right through them and continue on. Overall, most of these detachments have, you know, it's pretty obvious what units you want to use with them, but for Crusher Stampede, I think it's important to kind of pick out a few of them here. Maleceptor and the Emissary are two I really like. The Assimilator is also great. Mainly why I picked the Maleceptor and Emissary is because they are already really tough to take down. You've got, what, 14 to 16 wounds, 4 up invuln save, 2 or 3 up save. They're tanky, and your opponent will have to dedicate a lot of firepower to bring them down. And if you have a couple of each of those, it's going to be tough to bring down more than one a turn. And if they are bringing only one down a turn, then you're doing pretty good. Harusfexes are great just because they are so cheap and they can provide a lot of melee output that your opponent might not be able to deal with. The Scythed and Barbed Hero Duels also good because they, again, just have so many wounds that your opponent will probably have to focus fire them. And if they do focus fire and kill one, it's only one model and you're going to have, 5 or 6 more big ones coming up. Toxicrin's got a nice point decrease, so they are relatively bulky, 14 wounds, 2 up save. No invuln, but still, it's a lot for some opponents to deal with. Exocrines, always good, not as durable as most, but still good to have. Tyrannofexes are pretty meh with their new points. Had they not go up in points, I would recommend Rupture Cannon Tyrannofexes in this list, purely because of the +1 to hit bonus that you get for being wounded, and most of the time these things will survive a turn of shooting. I also would like to recommend Tyrants, but I don't know if they're necessary. Yes, we have a lot of good strats in this detachment, and maybe you want to take advantage of them. In terms of battle tactic strats, some good strats in there. Definitely the free reroll would be nice. But otherwise, that is Crusher Stampede as a whole. I'll come up with a list, or I have some lists, and I'll share them with you later in the week. Now we get into Vanguard Onslaught. Now this is what a lot of people are deeming to be their favorite, and it's not, it is powerful, but it's not an auto win tactic by any stretch of the imagination. You really do have to learn to play this one for it to be good. In the right hands, it's going to be powerful. In the wrong hands, you might be tabled in 2 turns. So the detachment rule is everybody gets fallback in charge, which is awesome. Vanguard Invader units get advance in charge, and the Death Leaper can be your Warlord. And the Death Leaper is very good these days, so if you want to be the Warlord, why not? He can't take enhancements though, which is whatever, but it basically just means if you only want him as a character, you can take him. The enhancements are pretty good. Chameleonic, so Vanguard Invader only, of course. Stealth for the unit, or for the model who has it, and the rest of the unit gets cover at all times. That's pretty good. Hunting Grounds, enemy units coming in from reserve must take a Battle Shock test. That can be spicy at times. You have 10 points for Stalker, Vanguard Invader unit only. Select one enemy unit, +1 to hit and wound that unit. Just very good. You just pick it at the start of the battle. 30 points for Neuronode. You can redeploy 3 units, Vanguard Invader units. They could be put in strategic reserve. Now, the important part that makes this one so powerful is it specifically says this can be done after you know who is going first. So you could keep your units all nice and protected on your side of the board, and if you roll off and you say, oh, I'm going first, well, let me just, plop these units of Von Ryan Leapers right next to you, or let me move these Gene Stealers over here so I can get a 8-inch scout move, and then a move and an advance and a charge, and it just, overall, you're going to get units into combat fast with this army. The big trick with this one is that your stuff doesn't hit high armor or high toughness very hard. So it's going to be a case of you want to tie your opponent up in their deployment zone as long as possible. Allow your other units to score primary and secondary quick, because your opponent is going to chew through you in a matter of, 2-3 turns, and then you're going to be done because you don't have that much staying power. They're going to kill you, but hopefully you've scored enough of a lead in the early game to make up for it. Now, for the detachments of Vanguard Onslaught, Assassin Beast, Precision Melee, Lictors already have it, but if you've got another key character you really want to drop, something that might be giving you a headache, well, give the whole unit precision. That could do some significant damage there. You then have Invisible Hunter for 1 CP. Return 1 infantry or 2 Vanguard Invader units to Strategic Reserve at the end of your opponent's turn. They have to be 3 inches away from enemies, so they can't be engaged at all. This is really good. I do like this one. Just like the Ravners can pop away and come back, this is something they can do. Yes, you have to pay for it in this instance, but the idea that, oh, you know, my 6 Von Ryan Leapers have hit really hard. There's only one of them left. Let me pull one away so he can come back later and still score me points. Could be very good. Surprise Assault for 1 CP. You select a Vanguard Invader unit. You can do this in shooting or fighting. That enemy unit, your unit that you select is +1 to hit that enemy unit, and then they have to take a Battle Shock test. If they fail that, they get +1 to wound against that unit as well. So good Battle Shock shenanigans going on there. 1 CP for Seated Broods. 2 Vanguard Invader or 1 other unit arrive from reserves a turn early, so you can have stuff come on turn 1 there. You cannot rapid ingress turn 1 though. That is unfortunate. But still, arriving early, again, just getting more units closer to the battlefield to your opponent as quick as possible. 1 CP for Unseen Lurkers. This is a great one. A Vanguard Invader unit cannot be shot if they're outside 12 inches of the opponent. If they have Lone Op, that goes to 6 inches away. So very powerful there if you've got a unit that just can't quite make it to combat. Maybe you have your melee warriors that are running up the board with a Tyranid Prime. They technically gain the Vanguard Invader keyword, so they could just have, you know, super stealth essentially. 2 CP for Hypersensoria Cilia, I don't know. 2 Vanguard Invader units or 1 other unit. A 6-inch move when the enemy moves within 9 inches of you. Again, this plays that kind of cat and mouse game. Unit gets close to you, maybe they want to come up and charge you. I'm just going to scoot 9 inches away this way. Probably aren't going to get to touch me, or maybe I'm standing out in the open. Enemy unit gets close, well, it's going to fall back into cover and be nice and safe. It's a lot of reactionary strats, and this army is going to be CP hungry because all of these stratagems are very good and you're going to want to use them a lot, so you have to be careful when you pick and choose them there. I do think the Flyrant might make it into these lists just because it is the cheapest Tyrant. It'll help you use these strats for free, and it does have the Vanguard Invader keyword, so he can benefit from some of these stratagems as well. We'll see when that comes to play in actual lists. Again, I have some lists that I will share with you later in the week, but that is Vanguard Onslaught in a basic nutshell right now. We then have a fun one that I am looking forward to trying, and that is Unending Swarm. So this is all about just rushing your opponent with gaunts, trying to hold the board as long as possible before they die. Hopefully you get enough of them on the board where your opponent just can't deal with them. The detachment rule is insurmountable odds. When an endless multitude unit is shot, it can move d6 inches towards the nearest enemy unit. It's basically that surge move that Khorne Berserkers have. Very powerful to get your melee units in there. They have to do it, which is an interesting one. And it can also happen multiple times and take them into melee. So if you think you got a long line of, 60 Hormagaunts, each time they get shot, hopefully, there's a lot of tricks to make these things durable. So your small unit hits them, they move closer. Another unit hits them, doesn't kill them all, they move closer. Another unit hits them, and then they move closer. And by then, maybe it's your turn, and then they get to move up the board, advance and charge, and just hit really hard. They have a couple good enhancements in here. I don't know how often they'll be used, but they have potential. The first one, Naturalized Camouflage. 3 endless, so you put it on a character, 3 endless multitude units within 9 inches get cover on round 1. And it might come into, you might want to use it if you have the points because you're going to have so many models. I'm thinking most of these lists are going to have 120 gaunts minimum, probably looking at 140. So you're going to have units that are sitting in the open. It'd be nice to have them at least have cover, or you could just take some Venom Thropes and have cover, depends. 20 points for Relentless Hunger, a 2-inch move, plus 2 inch to the move for the bear and his unit. Now there's only one thing that this can go on, and that is the Winged Prime. And the Winged Prime can only go with 2 units, so you could put this on a group of melee warriors, or well, you put it on the Winged Prime, and the Winged Prime goes with the melee warriors, and then they have 8-inch move, which is cool. Or you put this on gargoyles, and then they have 14-inch move. Again, I don't know if it's necessary, but it could be good. 25 points for Piercing Talons. Critical wounds for the bear and its unit get an extra AP. Again, same exact deal. Put it on the Winged Prime. You could put that on with gargoyles. Whoop-de-doo, you could put that on melee warriors. And now with the twin linked, you're more likely to get critical wounds in there. They become AP 1 extra, which I believe bumps them up to AP 3, which could be pretty good. But again, that's 25 points there. And finally, 15 points for Adrenalized Onslaught, which is 3 inches extra to pile in and consolidate. Again, it's all around that prime, really. You'd probably put Naturalized Camouflage on like a Turfgon. Everything else, maybe you boost up a prime or so. I think if you use this properly, you have the right tools and the right deployment, this could be a nightmare for your opponent. A lot of things do have the firepower to wipe out Gaunts. We have tricks, as you'll see in the strats, to get them to come back. But again, the name of this game, similar to Vanguard Invader, is you're going to stop your opponent from getting decent primary for the first 3 turns. It's going to be your turn 1, you want to get up the board so you can claim as much primary as possible and stop your opponent. Turn 2, you're going to want to hit your opponent by then and really just gum up their primary scoring, just outlast the opponent. Turn 3 comes along, maybe they're punching through, you still should have a primary hold, but a lot of your models are gone. And then turn 4, you're just surviving to score primary and secondary, and you move on through there. So I think it's got good play. There are ways to make Gaunts really durable. We'll go into the stratagems here, and so you can see some other tricks they have. The first one, Bounding Advance, an Endless Multitude unit gets an auto 8-inch advance. That's great. Hormagaunts, again, they can advance and charge. So this is an automatic, 16-inch move plus a charge for a big unit of Hormagaunts if you want to get them right up the board right away for a turn 1 charge. I believe, what does that give us? Depending on the deployment zone, some give you like an 18-inch no man's land, which is, there you go. Some give you a 24-inch no man's land, so maybe you don't want to use that right away, but it gives you the shot there. Unending Waves is a big one, and this is a strategic ploy stratagem, so unfortunately you cannot use a Tyrant to use this for free in any way, but it's 2 CP. When an Endless Multitude unit is destroyed, you put an identical unit into Strategic Reserve. You cannot put characters in there, so if you had like 20 Gargoyles and a Winged Prime, the Winged Prime is still dead, but the Gargoyles come back. I mean, again, you just get more units on the table. It could be good. 1 CP for Preservation Imperative. This is a really powerful one against certain units. You put it on one of your units and it counts as only 4 models when you get shot from the blast. Now think of a unit of Barbgaunts. What would happen if 5 Barbgaunts shot 20 Hormagaunts and then the blast keyword was turn off? Man, that cuts off so much shooting. That cuts off 4, 5, 20 shots less that the Barbgaunts are getting because of that stratagem. So I think that's going to have a big impact. 1 CP for Teeming Masses. An Endless Multitude unit is -1 to hit for the phase. Whether that's melee or fight phase, again, it just keeps them alive longer. 1 CP for Swarming Masses. Sustain hits on an Endless Multitude unit. If there are 15 plus hit models, they crit on 5s instead of 6s. So that one is a battle tactic one, so you could use it a couple times for free if you put a Tyrant in with the list. I don't know if Tyrant's necessary, but having that in there, the big combo with this one right now is you can have your Turfgon. You have your Turfgon give a Gaunt squad lethal hits, and now they have sustained and lethals, and they're critting on 5s to hit. It's going to be a very powerful combo that Gaunts, put them on a unit of Gaunts with Devourers. So now that's what, 40 shots? Hitting on 4s, but you're critting on 5s, you're sustaining. You're going to get a ton of shooting out there. Finally, Synaptic Goading. When an enemy, or when an Endless Multi-unit uses their Surge roll, you can reroll the d6, and instead you can move towards the closest objective. Instead of going straight towards your opponent, you could get a nice movement onto the objective and just cause more problems for your opponent or help you on primary later. So again, I think this one's really good. It will take a little bit of learning for someone to figure it out. Not only do you have to move a ton of models, recommend movement trays, but you got to move them right. You don't just throw everything at your opponent right away. You got to make sure they stay alive, they survive, and you can score and outlast your opponent at the same time. All right, now we come to what I think is my favorite one. Is the most competitive? I don't think so, but this is my favorite one, and I'm really eager to get all of the models painted up and show you guys what this one can do. Hopefully I can make it work because, again, the Assimilation Swarm is probably my favorite. So its ability is called the Feed the Swarm. So how this works is certain units have the Harvester keyword now. The Pyrovores, the Harusfexes, Psychophages, and Rippers have Harvester. And the way this works is if a Harvester unit is in range of an objective, it can do one of the following in the command phase. It can regenerate something in the command phase. And it is one model, restores D3 wounds. It can bring back, and that's just like a monster, it can bring back D3 wounds on a monster or something. One Endless Multitude unit can bring back 3 models. One infantry unit can bring back 1 model on full wounds. Now they can choose any unit within 6 inches. That unit can't be chosen twice. They could also choose themselves. Regenning is something Tyranids haven't had in this edition so far. No way to get it. But with this, some of our big units that we really like to have, your Norn Emissaries, your Zoanthropes, your Harusfexes, things that you want to have and have around, bringing back wounds, bringing back models. Very powerful. Now they can only do this again if they're in range of an objective, but you're going to want to use these to bully the objectives anyway. I consider a list with this is going to want to have 3 Harusfexes. You're going to want at least 2 units of 3 Pyrovores, maybe 3 units of 3 if you can pull it off. The only real downside to this unit selection that I see are the Psychophages. I don't like them. I do not like the Psychophages. Maybe I'll put one in the list if I can, but it pains me that they're the same price as a Harusfex. It pains me. They should be 100 points maximum. Then we're cooking with fire with this. And then Rippers, great. You can hide a Ripper on an objective everywhere, and they dual purpose on objectives as well. The ability to bring back some of your key units like Zoanthropes and Pyrovores, regenning the monsters, it's got significant potential, especially because some of our most points efficient stuff are also Harvester units. The enhancements we got 4 of them as always. Some of these are actually pretty good. You got Regenerating Monstrosity. Bears in this unit can be restored twice per turn, not a monster unit, so unfortunately you can't put this on a Tyrant and bring back 2 Tyrant Guard a turn. That was my first inclination, but you can't do it. Could put it on a Prime and bring back 2 Warriors a turn, or you could, actually I think that you could put it on a Prime and bring back 6 Gargoyles a turn, which is pretty cool. But yeah, so that's that one. Again, 20 points, but you can bring back a lot of models. That's per turn. So you have 6 Warriors, 2 of them, bring back 2 of them, and then, more die, and you bring back 2 more, and then you bring back 2 more. You have Instinctive Defense for 15 points, which is just fight first and free heroic intervention when you're within 6 inches of a Harvester unit. Note that doesn't have to be on objective or anything, so that's not bad. 10 points for Biophagic Flow. Harvester units within 12 inches have a 9-inch range for regenning. I think this one for 10 points should be included in every single one of these lists. Just increasing the range of that regen, more options the better, is great there. So I like that one, especially because the range of the character it's on is 12 inches. So you could have an objective. You could have an objective here. You could have a terrain piece here, and then the unit just hiding behind it. And then this thing could branch off. Think of the center objective. You have a couple harvester units on a center objective. Maybe you have two. Maybe you can squeak a third one on there. Thinking you're going to want like a pyrovore touching it. You're going to want a Haruspex or two touching it. And you're going to want like a Ripper Swarm touching it. Within 9 inches of that, they're all regenning things around. So that's potentially potent. In the last one, Biomorphology, +1 strength and melee. And then you get +1 attack if you kill an enemy unit within 6 inches of a harvester. This one is okay. So it does work on the whole unit. So again, you could put it on a prime and then the whole warrior unit gets that and they actually get an extra attack if it happens. You could put it on a foot tyrant and all the tyrant guard get +1 strength in melee and an extra attack. It's not a bad one. I can see this one being used a lot too. It is a little expensive, but again, in the right combination, it could be powerful. So I don't know competitively how much this is. I really want this one to work, but we'll see how it shakes up. We do have stratagems we'll talk about. So first one, Brood Guard Impulse. One harvester unit is slain, or if one harvester unit is slain, the rest of your army gets +1 to wound against the unit that killed it for the rest of the game. Which, if you're going to something like a big scary Wraith Knight or something, it kills, I don't know, a Ripper Swarm, it kills a Haruspex, it kills a Pyrovore squad, +1 wound. And there's no, you can't just use this once per, you could use this every turn if you have the strats to do it. You can use this multiple times a turn, +1 to wound. This could be really powerful when the right unit hits you. 1 CP for Reclaim Biomass. If a Tyranid unit is slain within 6 inches of Harvester, allow one Harvester unit to regen a unit within 6 inches. Again, if you have some chaff, some gargoyles, or a lictor, or something that just dies within 6 inches of a Harvester unit, you're just getting more wounds, and it's powerful. And this one can be done because it says it can only be regenerated once per phase, but that's per phase. So you could regen a unit in the command phase, and if a unit dies, it can regen again in that phase, and if you want to do it again, you could regen in another phase. So good there. 1 CP for Tyrannoformed. Command phase, making the objective sticky. Tyranids finally access to sticky objectives. Could be nice to have a unit of Von Ryan Leapers infiltrate up on the board, or just a Lictor or something infiltrate up on the board, sticky objective it, and then move on with your day. Could be powerful. Or if you want the Death Leaper, that could be a great option too. We have 2 CP for Ablative Carapace. This one's potentially quite powerful. 5-up Feel No Pain for a Harvester unit. If that unit is on an objective, it is a 4-up Feel No Pain. So very powerful in the right situation. Again, thinking of a Haruspex that's already tough to take down. It does only last for the phase, unfortunately. So it can't spell into the whole turn. And it is 2 CP. And it is an Epic Deed strat. So you can't get this one for free in any way. But in the right case, a 4-up Feel No Pain goes a long way on some models. We have another 1 CP for Secure Biomass. Lethal hits in melee. If it's on a Harvester unit, it crits on 5. So not bad there. I don't know how much critting is going to be, how much critical hits are going to matter in a Assimilation Swarm. We don't have too many melee units that rely on having crits in melee, so it's okay, but maybe there's something out there I'm forgetting and it's good for it. And finally, Rampacious Hunger. A unit destroys an enemy in the fight phase, that unit then gets to regen. So D3 last wounds, or one model regains up. When doing so, if your unit is a Harvester unit, and you choose for one model to regain up to 3 wounds, that model can regain 3 lost wounds instead. Yeah, so it's just more regenning for the harvesters. So again, this is all about regenning, staying power and objectives, which I really do like. I think some of the stuff, again, pyrovores can have some immense staying power. Imagine a unit 3 pyrovores now have 5 wounds. They're only 90 points. 5 wounds, 3 up save. Stick a venom throw within range of them. Now they can have a 2 up save. They have stealth because they're infantry, -1 to wound. You could give them feel no pain if you wanted to. But at the same time, if your opponent kills 1 or 2, one's alive, you can get a whole pyrovore back for free. And they have awesome overwatch. Again, we're spending strats, but anyway, that's the Assimilation Swarm. I really like it. I think it's got potential. As long as the harvest effect stays at the price point it is, I think it's got great potential. The only downside is, for some reason, the Assimilator doesn't have any special things in the Assimilation Swarm, which makes no sense. Whatever. Finally, I think we just have one left, right? The Synaptic Nexus. So the Synaptic Nexus, our final one. This one kind of harkens back to some old rules, kind of like how Crusher Stampede did. It is one that branches on having units within synapse range. Shocker. And you get 3 imperatives you get to choose. At the start of each turn, you get to pick one. You can only use one once. Again, kind of how the old rules used to work. You have a 5-up invuln save, +1 to advance and charge, and +1 to hit melee. It affects all units and all units within synapse range. This one has potential. Again, there's no doubt, we've seen it before with Tyranids, that having a turn of 5-up invuln save army-wide potentially is very powerful. Is very, very powerful. And then you have a turn of +1 to advance and charge. Doesn't give you advance and charge, but +1 to your advances and your charges can now get you into melee, and then once you're in melee, you can get +1 to hit. I think these are pretty powerful. I do wish that they gave you a 4th one, which was, I don't know, everyone has cover, or +2 to their movement, or something with shooting, army-wide, give it like a sustain hits or something. I know we already have that, but still, I wish there was a 4th one, because it feels like maybe you don't use one on turn 1, and then maybe you don't use one on turn 5. You still have 3, but you have just these 3. I don't know. It's okay. It's not bad. You have the enhancements, 10 points for Power of the Hive Mind, +1 strength and +1 AP to a psychic weapon. Now, unless I'm wrong, the only character we have with a psychic weapon is the Neuro Tyrant. So his Flamer goes from pretty good to pretty terrifying, as a Neuro Tyrant's Flamer with this becomes strength 6, AP -2, 2 damage with 2d6 shots. A very powerful weapon it becomes there. You have Psychostatic Disruption for 30 points. Cannot set up within, your opponent cannot set up units within 12 inches of bearer. And you also can roll on a 4+, delay your opponent's reserve return. So it's like, okay, I'm going to bring in my Terminators. 4+. No, you aren't. You have to wait till next turn. Which is pretty powerful, actually, in the whole grand scheme of things. So then you have 20 points for Synaptic Control. Put on a character, -1 damage for the bearer. Pretty good. -1 damage. We lost that on the Tyrannofex, so putting it on a Tyrant probably will go a long way. You could put it on a Turvagun. That Turvagun is going to be a nasty thing to bring down. You already know how good the Tyrannofex was to bring down, or tough it was. Now for 20 points, you can make your Turvagun that durable. Still, I like that one. 15 points for the Dirge here of Karis. Worse than the enemy leadership by 1 within 9 inches. It's okay. It's okay. It'll help with Battleshock tests, though. Definitely help with Battleshock tests. It seems like there's some good potential. We already have good Synapse units. So if you can choose your imperatives properly, I feel like this is a powerful one. Then we have our stratagems. For 1 CP, we have Smothering Shadow. When an enemy unit fails Battleshock within 12 inches of a Synapse unit, 6d6 are rolled. And for each 4+, that unit takes a mortal wound. Again, that is really powerful. It's 1 CP to do a bunch of mortal wounds, potentially. We have 1 CP for Synaptic Channeling. You have a 9-inch synapse range for the turn. It is just 1 unit, I should say that. 1 unit has 9-inch synapse range for the turn, which is still powerful. 1 CP for Irresistible Will. Synapse unit marks an enemy unit within 24 inches. Friendly units within 6 inches of that Synapse unit reroll hits and wounds of 1 for that phase against that unit. A little confusing there, but reroll hits and wounds of 1 can be very powerful. 1 CP for Reinforced Hive Node. Worsen the AP by 1 when a Synapse unit is attacked. Lasts for the phase. Not bad. A lot of our Synapse units already have invuln saves. So I don't know how often. I guess this one will probably be really good on something like a Turfagon or a Norn Assimilator who don't have the invuln saves. Could be a good one to help them keep their 2-up saves lasting longer. We have 1 CP for Imperative Dominance. Activate a different imperative for 1 unit within Synapse range. So they'll have just the 1 active, and then it doesn't mean they can't have that imperative later. So it's not bad. And then you have Override Instincts. Fall back, shoot, and charge for a unit within Synapse range. That's pretty good. Fall back, shoot, and charge. Again, picture something like your Assimilator or your Emissary. Fall backing, charge, shoot, and charge. I can imagine your Assimilator's in combat with something it doesn't really want to be in combat with. Fall back, shoot it with its harpoons, and then charge in with a nice easy charge there. I think this one is probably the best one if you want to take Assimilators. This is the one to do. I would take probably 2 Assimilators and an Emissary if I'm running this one. I would also probably put in a Maleceptor or 2. You'll want your Zoanthropes. Hive Tyrant, again, is probably not necessary. The Reinforced Hive Node is a battle tactic, so I guess that is good because you could get that one for free. Synaptic Channeling is also a battle tactic, and Irresistible Will is also one. So you could make those work. Those are actually probably some of the best battle tactic ones we have out of all of them, so maybe a Hive Tyrant makes sense in this detachment. But definitely the Assimilator, what comes to mind is you can run them up the board, you can give them that 5-up invuln save, and now, you know, they're going to be decently durable. So that is pretty much everything I have. This has probably been a long video. Again, I just want to give my initial impressions on all of the detachments. I kind of gave a few units here and there. Next in the videos, I've got a video coming that'll be 5 units that are almost auto-include into every tier in the list. Now that we've seen the book and the attachments, there are a bunch of units that stand out as they're really good and we need to have. There is also a video that will be coming that is a list for every detachment here. What I think is an initial good first list here for each of them. Again, I won't have time to play them all, and we're also, in a few days, filming a battle report, which will hopefully be out next week. I am painting up my models as fast as possible. I don't think I'm going to have enough done for that, for the battle report to play the list I want to play, but we'll still play something fun. We'll show off some cool models, and we will get into the rest of it. So that's what we got. We're kicking off the new Tyranid Codex. A lot of people are doom and glooming about this codex. Well, not necessarily the codex, but the point changes that came with it in the update to the Minotaur Field Manual and the Balanced Data Slate. I don't think that's the case. I think there are some things they got wrong. Tyrannofexes, Hive Tyrants, and Swarmy are stupid expensive now for what they do. That is unfortunate, but I do think this book has a ton of tools, and Tyranids will still be in a good place. Maybe not as powerful as we want them to be, but we obviously want them to be good. I think together we will make them plenty strong. So that's all we got. We'll cut the rambling. Make sure to stay tuned to the next videos I've got coming out, and I'm looking forward to diving in and showing off this stuff. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you members for keeping the channel going. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time here at Maelstrom Gaming Studios.